Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like leaving was the only option? What was the hardest decision you had to make, and how did you find the courage to do it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you're ready to hear the whole story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as crazy as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let's get into it. The wind was cold against Maria's skin as she stood by the front door, staring out at the empty street. It was another long day, another day filled with worry. The house felt smaller with each passing hour, and no matter how much she tried, she couldn't escape the weight of it all. Lily, their 8-year-old daughter, had been sick for months now. It started as a cough, but no matter how many doctors they saw or medications they tried, nothing seemed to help. Maria watched her daughter grow weaker every day, and it broke her heart. She could hear Evan in the kitchen, scraping together the last of their meager groceries, trying to make something out of nothing. He was trying, she knew that, but trying wasn't enough. Maria had told herself that if she just held on a little longer, things would get better. She kept telling herself that, but every day felt like a battle she wasn't winning. The bills piled up. The doctor's visits drained what little money they had left. She glanced down at her phone. No new messages from Evan's latest job interview. Nothing. She didn't even know why she still hoped. It had been the same cycle for months. He'd apply for jobs, work for a while, but nothing ever stuck. As the house grew colder with the evening, Maria felt the familiar knot of frustration tighten in her chest. She couldn't keep doing this. Not like this. Evan walked into the living room, his face haggard from another long day. His job at the warehouse wasn't paying enough to cover even half of their bills, and he couldn't stand seeing Maria struggle. He loved her. He loved Lily, but he had no answers for any of it. I couldn't find anything at the store. I'm sorry, he said, his voice heavy with defeat. Maria didn't respond right away. She just stared at him, the same sadness in her eyes that she had for the past few weeks. She wasn't angry, not anymore, but she was exhausted. She didn't know how much longer she could pretend that things were going to get better. I'll make something out of what we've got, Evan said, trying to offer a smile. He wasn't a quitter, and he never would be. But his words, just like his efforts, didn't feel like enough anymore. Maria sighed and turned back toward the window, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Lily's faint cough echoed down the hall, a reminder that there was no way out of this. She tried to keep herself composed, but the tears welled up, and for a moment, she let them fall. The weight of their lives hung between them. Evan's exhaustion, Maria's hopelessness, and Lily's illness. It was all too much. I've been thinking, Maria said quietly, her voice trembling slightly as she wiped her eyes. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's time I file for divorce. Evan froze. The words cut through the silence like a blade. What? His voice cracked, the shock clear on his face. He knew things were bad. But this was the last thing he expected. I can't do this anymore, Evan, Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't keep waiting for something to change when nothing ever does. I don't know how much longer I can pretend everything's okay for Lily's sake. I can't keep living like this. Evan's heart sank. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. All the things he wanted to say, the words of reassurance, the promises, seemed so empty now. How could he promise her things would get better when he had no answers? I'm so sorry, Maria said, her voice breaking. She didn't want to hurt him. She didn't want to walk away from the life they had built. But her heart had been heavy with this decision for so long. The weight of it was crushing her. Lily appeared in the doorway, her small figure frail and fragile. Mommy? She whispered, looking between them. Maria's heart broke at the sight of her daughter, standing there with those innocent eyes. I'm okay, sweetie, Maria said softly, forcing a smile. She kneeled down to meet her daughter's gaze. You're going to be okay too. We're going to figure this out. But the words felt hollow. How could she promise that? How could she promise Lily that things would be okay when her world was falling apart? Evan swallowed hard, trying to find his voice. Maria, you don't mean this. We can work through it. I know it's been hard, but We've got to stick together. We've been through worse, haven't we? Maria shook her head, her eyes filled with tears. I don't know how much more I can give, Evan. I'm not enough for this family anymore. And just like that, the decision was made. Evan stood there, stunned, unable to speak as Maria walked toward the door. Lily looked up at him, confused, but he couldn't find the words to explain. He couldn't make her understand. Not right now. As Maria stepped outside into the cool night air, the heavy silence settled in the room behind her. She didn't know what her future held, but she knew that she couldn't continue living in a relationship that felt like it was suffocating her. She was doing what she thought was best for her daughter, for herself. It had been 3 days since Maria walked out. Evan couldn't bring himself to even unpack his clothes. They were still scattered across the couch, where he'd thrown them after coming home from the warehouse that first night. The house felt colder now, emptier. He stood by the kitchen window, staring out at the same street, the same small world he'd always known. He had no idea where to go from here. Maria's words played in his mind over and over. She couldn't do it anymore. She needed to leave. That morning, Evan had gone through his usual routine, grabbing a cheap cup of coffee from the corner store, putting on his work boots, and heading out to the warehouse. As usual, his manager barely acknowledged his presence. No raise, no praise, just the same grueling day of lifting boxes and staring at the clock, counting down the hours. But today, something was different. A letter had arrived, addressed to him in a handwriting he didn't recognize. The envelope was thick, the kind that made your stomach twist just by holding it. There was no return address, just his name, Evan Walker, in bold black ink. When he saw the letter sitting on the kitchen counter that evening, he hesitated. It wasn't like him to get anything important. No one ever wrote to him. Certainly not like this. He opened it slowly, almost not believing what he was reading. At first, the words didn't make sense. He thought maybe it was some kind of scam, but the more he read, the more it sank in. He could hardly believe it. It was from a lawyer, notifying him that he had just inherited a $50 billion empire, a vast fortune from a wealthy uncle he'd never met. The details were clear. His uncle had passed away, leaving him everything. A sprawling estate, multiple companies, investments. Everything. Evan dropped the letter, his hands shaking. His first instinct was to laugh. This couldn't be real. It felt like a cruel joke, like the world was playing with him. His life had been nothing but struggle. And now, suddenly, everything had changed. He felt dizzy, like the ground beneath him had tilted. Maria hadn't responded to his texts or calls. He hadn't seen her since that night, and the silence between them had begun to weigh on him. The worst part? He didn't even know where she'd gone. He tried to reach her again after reading the letter, but his messages remained unread. That night, after an endless day of work and shock, Evan sat on the couch, the letter still in his hands, staring at the cold walls around him. Lily was asleep, her small, fragile figure tucked under the covers. He had to remind himself to breathe. His mind raced, but it wasn't just about the money. He didn't know what to do with any of it. The realization hit him like a wave. He could give Maria everything she ever wanted. All the things he hadn't been able to provide. The medical bills, the treatment for Lily's illness. They could live a life free from struggle. But then another thought entered his mind. A sharp, ugly question. Would it matter? Would it even be enough to fix what was broken? Was Maria gone for good? Could this money bring her back? He stood up and paced the room, feeling restless. The letter was still in his hands, but all it seemed to do now was remind him of how alone he felt. The wealth didn't change the heartache, didn't fix the way Maria had walked away from him. After a while, Evan grabbed his phone. He stared at it, wondering if he should call her again. He wanted to tell her. Maybe it would change things, he thought. But the truth was, he didn't even know who he was anymore. Was he the man she left behind? Or was he the man with the fortune? He couldn't stop thinking about Lily, about the treatment she needed. His heart ached just thinking about the way her small body had grown weaker over the past few months. But even with all this wealth now within his grasp, he wasn't sure if it could undo the damage. The phone rang. It wasn't Maria. Instead, it was the lawyer, a man named John Collins, who had sent the letter earlier in the day. Evan felt his pulse quicken as he answered. "Mr. Walker?" The lawyer's voice was smooth, professional. "This is John Collins. I'm calling to go over the next steps regarding your inheritance. I understand this may come as a shock, but we need to discuss the estate, assets, and—" Evan interrupted, his voice shaking. I don't know what to say. I can't believe this is real." "It is," Collins said. "I can help you get organized. But there's something we need to address first. You'll need to make arrangements for the estate. But there's also a clause in the will. Your uncle was very clear." Evan didn't let him finish. "What does that mean for me and my family?" he asked, a knot tightening in his chest. "Your uncle wanted to make sure this wealth went to someone who could handle it," the lawyer explained, his tone becoming more serious. "It's not just about money. There are certain conditions attached to your inheritance. You'll need to resolve some personal matters, namely your family situation, before you can access the full assets." Evan sat back, his head spinning. His family, Maria and Lily, had always been his driving force. But now the lawyer was telling him that this wealth, this empire, came with conditions. Maria's departure was a part of the equation. He felt his stomach churn. Could he rebuild what was broken? Was it even possible to repair the damage that had been done? The future felt uncertain, and Evan didn't know where to turn. But one thing was clear: this was no longer just about money. It was about saving his family. He had the chance to fix everything, if he could only figure out how. Imagine finding out you've inherited a fortune, but it comes with strings attached. Would it be enough to fix everything? What would you do if you had the power to change your life, but not without consequences? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The days that followed felt like a blur to Evan. It had been over a week since he'd received the letter, and the shock was still there, settling deep in his chest. His entire life had been one struggle after another, and now, out of nowhere, he had more money than he could ever spend. But instead of feeling relief, he felt more lost than ever. He sat in the small, dimly lit kitchen, staring at the letter from John Collins, the lawyer, who had sent him endless follow-ups. There was talk about the inheritance, about the estate he needed to manage. But Evan didn't care about that right now. His thoughts were still consumed by Maria and the divorce papers she'd filed. Felt like his heart had been ripped out. She had left him. She had walked out on their daughter, on him, without a second glance. He tried to remind himself that Maria had been frustrated, that she had felt alone and overwhelmed. She had felt like he couldn't take care of them anymore. But that didn't make it any easier to accept. Evan stared at the phone in his hand. He wanted to call her. He had tried several times already, but the calls had gone straight to voicemail. He thought about the things he wanted to say, how he had changed, how things could be different now that he had money. But the words didn't feel right. They felt empty. What if Maria didn't care anymore? What if everything he did was for nothing? Maria, on the other hand, was struggling with her own emotions. She sat in her small apartment, barely furnished, just a few pieces of furniture that she had picked up from the thrift store, staring out the window. The apartment was quieter than she'd expected. The peace felt strange, almost too quiet. Her heart still ached for Lily, for the life she had tried so hard to hold together. But she couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. She had thought that leaving would be easier. She thought it would feel like a weight had been lifted, but it didn't. Felt like the world had closed in on her. The apartment wasn't the fresh start she had imagined. It wasn't the freedom she had hoped for. She had made the decision to leave, to move on from the life she had with Evan. But now, every part of her felt torn. The silence was unbearable, and she couldn't stop thinking about Lily. Was it the right choice? She still missed the sound of Evan's voice. Even if they hadn't been perfect, they had been a family. And now she was alone. Maria picked up her phone, staring at it for a moment before her finger hovered over the screen. She hadn't responded to his messages, hadn't picked up his calls. She wasn't sure what to say. The call would be easier, wouldn't it? Part of her wanted to hear his voice, just one more time. But another part of her was afraid. She was scared to see how much had changed between them. scared that things couldn't go back to what they were. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed. Evan had left another voicemail. "I know you're probably not going to pick up, but I just want you to know that I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. I know I've messed up, but I'm trying to fix it. I'm trying, Maria. You don't have to do this alone. I'm different now. We can still be a family." His words were simple, but the sincerity in them made Maria's chest tighten. Her eyes filled with tears as she heard him speak about Lily, about the future they could have. But could they? Could she really go back to him now that so much had changed? She set the phone down, her thoughts racing. She had made the choice to leave. She had made the choice to take control of her life, to take control of her own happiness. But how could she move on when part of her still longed for what they had? Evan sat at the kitchen table, staring at the phone in his hands. He was waiting, hoping for some sign that things could go back to how they were. But deep down, he knew the truth. Maria had made up her mind. She had already moved on. And yet, he couldn't let go. He kept imagining Lily smiling, playing in the yard, running to him for comfort. He imagined Maria there, too, standing next to him as a family again. He imagined a future that felt possible now, thanks to the wealth he had inherited. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about them, about finding a way back to each other. Evan finally stood up, running his hand through his hair in frustration. He wasn't sure what to do next. He wasn't sure if he should keep trying to fix things with Maria or if he should just give up and accept that she had moved on. The future was uncertain. The wealth he had didn't change his heartache. Meanwhile, Maria sat in the dimly lit apartment, the phone still sitting next to her. She couldn't bring herself to call him back. Not yet. Maybe she was scared. Maybe she didn't know what to say. But a part of her couldn't help but wonder. Was there a chance to rebuild what they had? Could she trust that Evan had really changed? Her heart was torn in two. She knew she had to make a choice, whether to let the past go or try to piece together the broken parts of her family. Have you ever had to make a decision that could change everything? When is it the right time to fight for love and when is it time to move on? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The sound of Evan's phone vibrating on the counter broke the silence. He stared at the screen, his heart skipping a beat when he saw Maria's name flashing across it. It had been days, no weeks, since they last spoke. He had sent countless texts and left dozens of voicemails, but she never responded. She was still distant, and he couldn't help but feel the sting of rejection each time he reached out. Taking a deep breath, he swiped to answer. "Maria." "Yeah." Her voice came through, quieter than he expected. There was a brief pause before she spoke again. "I need to talk to you." Maria sat in her car, parked just outside Evan's house. She hadn't planned to come here, but after hearing about his inheritance from a mutual friend, she found herself driving to the old house that used to feel like home. Now it felt like a distant memory. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. What was she doing here? Wasn't she the one who had walked away? Wasn't she the one who needed space? And yet, the part of her that missed Evan was too strong to ignore. It had been weeks since she'd seen him, weeks since she'd even had the courage to hear his voice. Evan stood by the window, his fingers curling around the phone. His heart was racing. He hadn't expected her to call. He hadn't expected her to show up, but here she was, forcing him into the space they both avoided. "Are you coming in?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Maria took a deep breath before responding. I don't know if I should." "Maria," he said softly, "we need to talk. We can't keep avoiding this. Not with everything going on." The moment she stepped inside, the house felt even more empty than before. There was a strange, uncomfortable silence that settled in the air between them. The weight of the unspoken words hovered over them like a storm cloud, waiting to burst. Evan led her into the living room, where they both sat down. The tension in the room was thick, and for a few moments, neither of them spoke. Maria couldn't help but glance at the papers on the table. Divorce papers, her own handwriting. She had signed them, but something inside her still wondered if she'd made the right choice. Evan finally broke the silence. "I've been thinking about the inheritance, about everything," he He paused, his hands fidgeting in his lap. I don't know what to do with all of it. It feels like a blessing, but at the same time, it just doesn't feel right without you. Maria clenched her fists, trying to keep her emotions in check. Evan, I don't know what you expect me to say. You've had the chance to change things before, but you never did. Now, you think this money will fix everything? It won't, you know. Her words stung and Evan winced. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. What was he supposed to say? That the money didn't matter? It did, in some ways. It gave him the chance to fix things, to make their life easier. But in the end, it was still just paper. Couldn't heal the hurt between them. Maria let out a frustrated sigh and stood up, pacing across the room. I don't know if I can do this, Evan. I don't know if I can go back to that life, to that uncertainty. I'm scared, and I'm tired. I don't know how many times I can say it, but I can't. Evan stood up too, moving toward her. I understand you're scared. I'm scared too, but I'm not asking for a perfect life. I'm asking for a chance. A real chance to rebuild, to fix what's broken. They were inches apart now, but the space between them felt endless. Maria wanted to reach out. She wanted to tell him that she still loved him, that she wasn't sure what to do, that she missed him. But the fear of being hurt again held her back. I never wanted this, she whispered, her voice breaking. I never wanted us to be this way, but I don't know how to fix it. Evan, I just don't. Evan reached out slowly, his hand hovering near hers. His voice was steady, but his heart was pounding. Maybe we don't have to fix everything right now. Maybe we just need to take one step at a time. Can we at least try? For a moment, Maria didn't move. She stared at his hand, at the man who used to be her whole world. Her heart wavered, torn between wanting to hold on and wanting to walk away. Finally, she reached out, her fingers brushing his. It was the smallest of gestures, but in that moment, it felt like a breakthrough. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you wanted to fix everything, but didn't know where to start? What would you do if someone you loved asked for a second chance? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. The room felt still as Evan and Maria sat in silence. The weight of the past hung between them, and no matter how much they wanted to pretend it was all in the past, the truth lingered in the air. It had been so long since they talked like this, truly talked. Not about the bills, not about the kids, not about the small details of daily life. They hadn't looked at each other like this in years. Maria shifted in her seat, her gaze flicking toward the window. Evan noticed the way her shoulders tensed, like she was holding something back. The silence felt heavy. Maria, I know we've both made mistakes, Evan said quietly, but we have to talk about why we're here, why this happened. Maria took a deep breath, her hands gripping the edge of the chair. She hadn't wanted to go down this path. She had tried to forget, but the pain was still there, bubbling just beneath the surface. The hurt she carried from the years of struggles, the silent battles they fought behind closed doors. I don't know if I can talk about it, she said, her voice trembling. She looked at Evan, but her eyes couldn't quite meet his. You know how hard it was, for both of us, but you didn't see it. You didn't see how alone I was. Evan's heart clenched at her words. He had always known there were cracks in their marriage, but he had never truly understood how deep they ran. He hadn't realized how much she had been carrying. I didn't see it because I was too focused on surviving, he said, his voice thick. I was trying to make it work, but I couldn't see that you were drowning too. I should have noticed, Maria. I should have seen the signs. Maria shook her head, her eyes growing distant. You were never really there, Evan. Even when you were in the room, you weren't with me. You were too focused on fixing things that we couldn't fix. You didn't hear me when I needed you. The truth of her words hit Evan like a slap to the face. He had tried so hard to provide, to do what was expected, but he had failed to see the emotional toll on his family. He had been so consumed by the idea of being a good provider that he hadn't noticed how Maria had suffered silently. Why didn't you say something? He asked, a mix of guilt and frustration in his voice. Why didn't you tell me how bad it was? Maria sighed, wiping away a tear that had slipped down her cheek. I didn't know how. You were always so busy with work, with the bills. And I didn't want to burden you more. I didn't want to seem like I couldn't handle things. But after a while, I couldn't keep pretending anymore." Evan reached for her hand, his fingers trembling slightly as he touched her skin. "I never wanted you to feel like that. I never wanted you to feel alone. I thought I was doing what was best for us, but I was wrong." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Maria turned her gaze back toward the window, her thoughts heavy. She wasn't sure if she was ready to forgive him, if she was ready to let go of the pain that had been there for so long. But Evan wasn't the only one carrying guilt. Maria had her own regrets, too. The way she had left so suddenly. The way she had walked away, thinking it would be easier. She finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "When Lily got sick, that's when everything changed. I had no idea what to do. I thought if we had more money, things would get better. But it never did. The bills kept piling up, and nothing was ever enough. I was so scared, Evan, and I didn't know how to keep pretending like I was okay." Evan squeezed her hand, his heart breaking as she spoke. He hadn't realized the toll Lily's illness had taken on her. The stress, the fear. He had been so focused on trying to fix things with work that he hadn't seen the desperation in her eyes. "I was scared too," he admitted, his voice cracking. "But I thought that if I worked harder we could fix it. I didn't realize that it wasn't just about money. It was about being there for each other." Maria nodded, wiping away another tear. "And when I needed you the most, I felt like you were already gone. Like you didn't even see me anymore. I felt so invisible." Evan looked at her, his heart heavy with regret. "I didn't mean to make you feel that way. I was just trying to fix everything. But I didn't know how." There was a long silence between them, filled only by the sound of the wind outside. Maria felt like a weight had been lifted, but it was replaced by a new weight, one that was even heavier. The truth was out, but now she wasn't sure what to do with it. She stood up, her hands shaking as she walked over to the window. She stared out at the street, watching as the last light of the day faded. She didn't know if she could forgive Evan. Not yet, maybe not ever. But she also couldn't deny that things had changed. Finally, she turned back toward him. "I don't know if I'm ready to fix this, Evan. But I'm not sure I want to walk away either." Evan stood up too, taking a step toward her. "We don't have to fix everything all at once. But I'm willing to try. I'll fight for us. I just need you to let me in. Can you do that?" For the first time in a long while, Maria looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time in a long while, she saw the man she had fallen in love with. Have you ever had to face painful truths in a relationship? How do you move forward after the past has been uncovered? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The next few days felt different. Maria wasn't sure what had changed, but something in the air between her and Evan felt lighter. It wasn't that everything was suddenly perfect. It wasn't. There was still tension, still silence at times, but something had shifted. She arrived at Evan's house that afternoon, her heart in her throat. She didn't know why she was coming back. Not really. But every time she thought about leaving, she thought about Lily, about the possibility of giving them another chance. Evan had been so different lately, trying to prove that he wanted to fix things. He wasn't perfect, and neither was she, but they were both willing to try. Evan greeted her at the door, a soft smile on his face. It wasn't the big, confident smile he used to wear, the one that could light up a room. This was different. It was quieter, more genuine. "Hey," he said, stepping aside so she could come in. Maria hesitated for a second, then stepped through the door. The house still felt familiar, but there were small changes, things she hadn't noticed before. Little touches that spoke of him, trying to make it feel like home again. She wasn't sure if she was ready for it, but she didn't pull away. "How's she doing?" Maria asked softly, looking toward the living room where Lily was playing with her toys. Evan had always been a loving father, but now, watching him interact with their daughter, she could see a tenderness in him that she hadn't noticed before. He wasn't just going through the motions, he was fully present. "Better," Evan replied, his voice softer than usual. "We're trying a new treatment. She's more active, so that's a good sign. She's still got a long way to go, but I'm hopeful. There was a warmth in his voice that Maria hadn't heard in a long time. It was like he wasn't just speaking out of obligation anymore, he meant it, and it made her heart ache. She wanted to believe it too. She wanted to believe that they could find their way back. They sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where so many arguments had happened. But this time, there was no shouting, no blaming. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of Lily playing. I've been thinking, Evan started, his voice a little unsure. I know I can't just erase the past, Maria. I can't pretend like everything that happened didn't matter. But I want to try. I want to be the man you deserve. The father Lily deserves. I know I wasn't there when you needed me, but I want to make that right. If you'll let me. Maria felt her heart tighten at his words. She had wanted to hear this for so long, but she was still scared. She was scared that if she let herself believe, she would only be setting herself up for more heartbreak. I'm not asking for you to forgive me overnight, Evan continued. I know that takes time, but I just want you to know that I'm trying. And I'm here. I'll be here as long as you'll have me. Her breath caught in her throat as she looked at him. For a moment, all she could see was the man she had married. The man who had once made her laugh, made her feel safe. The man who had stood by her through so much, even when they were barely holding on. The man she had pushed away. I don't know, Evan, she whispered, her voice fragile. I don't know if I can just pick up where we left off. I don't know if I can forget everything that happened. But I see you trying. I do. And I'm not saying we'll be okay right away. But maybe we can start small. Maybe we can figure this out together. His face softened as he reached across the table, his hand resting gently on hers. Small steps, I can do that. We can do that. Together. There was a quiet understanding between them now, a shared sense of longing. Maria could feel the walls inside her starting to crumble, just a little. She wasn't ready to trust him completely again, but she was willing to try. She was willing to see if they could rebuild what they had. The door to the living room opened, and Lily came running in, a wide grin on her face. Mom! Dad! Look what I made! Evan and Maria both turned to see their daughter holding up a drawing, proud and excited. It was a picture of their family, her, Evan, and Maria standing together, smiling. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't have to be. Maria smiled softly, the lump in her throat easing just a little. She reached out to take the drawing from Lily, her fingers brushing against her daughter's. It's beautiful, sweetie, she said, her voice full of warmth. Evan looked at them both, his heart swelling with emotion. It was a simple moment, but in that moment, everything felt possible. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time he had hope. Maria glanced at him, her heart full of conflicting emotions. She wasn't sure if they were ready for everything, but they had made it this far. Maybe that was enough to start with. As the evening wore on, they shared a quiet dinner, the conversation flowing more easily than it had in months. There were no grand gestures, no promises, just the small, everyday moments that had once felt so natural. Have you ever experienced a moment where, despite everything that's happened, you felt like there was a chance for something new? How do you rebuild trust after it's been broken? Let us know in the comments below. Started with a phone call. Evan had stepped into the kitchen, his mind preoccupied with work. It had been a stressful week. He had to deal with more than just the inheritance. The pressure was mounting. But he hadn't expected Maria's reaction when she picked up the phone. She was sitting in the living room, Lily beside her, when the call came. Evan couldn't hear what was said, but he could tell by the look on her face that something was wrong. His pulse quickened as he walked toward her. Maria? He asked, his voice tense. She looked up, her eyes flickering with something he didn't quite understand. For a split second, he thought it might be fear. But then it was gone. I have to go, she said softly, standing up. Her words were calm, but there was a sharpness to her tone, a distance that wasn't there before. Go? Go where? Evan asked, his voice rising slightly. What's going on? She shook her head, looking away from him. "I need to take care of something. I'll be back later." Before he could stop her, she was already out the door. Evan stood there, stunned, the air in the room thick with confusion. His mind raced. What was happening? Minutes passed, and Evan tried calling her, but her phone went straight to voicemail. His stomach churned with unease, a feeling he couldn't shake. The old fears began to creep back in, the ones that told him that things were too fragile, that maybe they weren't as close as he thought. By the time she returned, it was dark. Maria came through the front door, her face unreadable. "You were gone for hours," Evan said, trying to keep his voice steady. "What happened?" Maria didn't answer right away. She was too busy taking off her jacket, her eyes avoiding his. "Maria," Evan pressed, his patience wearing thin. "What happened?" She sighed and finally looked at him, her expression hard. "I ran into someone today." The word stung, though she didn't seem to realize it. Evan's mind raced. "Someone? Who?" She hesitated, then replied, "It was Mark, the guy I used to work with. Remember?" Evan felt his heart drop. Mark, the man Maria had mentioned a few times in the past. They'd been friends before, back when things had been easier, before everything had spiraled out of control. "And?" Evan asked, trying to stay calm, though his voice cracked with the fear he couldn't suppress. "He offered me a job," she said, her voice clipped. "A good one. He said he could help me get back on my feet. He thinks I'm talented. And honestly, Evan, I've been thinking about it." There it was, the words he had been dreading. He could feel the anger rising in him, though he tried to keep it under control. It wasn't just the job offer, it was the way she was looking at him. She was too far gone. She didn't need him anymore. She didn't need them anymore. "You're serious?" Evan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "After everything we've been through, you're just going to leave? Just like that?" Maria flinched but didn't back down. "I'm not leaving, Evan. I'm just thinking about it. About what I need. About what's best for me." The words hit harder than he expected. For a moment, everything inside him went still. His mind was spinning, and he couldn't make sense of what she was saying. He thought they were finally getting somewhere, but now it felt like everything was unraveling. Maria looked at him, her eyes filled with exhaustion. "I've been giving so much of myself for so long, Evan. But I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know if I even know how to be part of this family." The room seemed to close in around him. Evan could feel his throat tighten. "So what, you just walk away? After all of it? After everything we've been through, you just leave?" "I'm not leaving you, Evan," she said, her voice breaking. "But I need something for me. I need to figure out who I am again. I can't do that if I'm always waiting for you to come through for me." Her words were like a punch to the gut. He wanted to scream, to demand that she stay, that they could fix everything. But there was something in her eyes that told him she was already gone. At least a part of her was. He hadn't seen it coming. Not this. Not now. Not when they were trying. "You know, I don't think you get it," he said, his voice low with a mixture of hurt and anger. "I've been trying. I've been trying for you, for us, and yet, every time I get close, you pull away. You always pull away." Maria stepped back, her face pale. "I'm not pulling away, Evan. I'm just trying to figure out if I can be the person you need me to be. I'm not sure I can be that anymore." She turned and walked out the door again, this time leaving for good. Evan was left standing there, the silence of the house filling the empty space between them. Have you ever faced a moment where someone you love walked away, leaving you questioning everything you thought you knew? How do you handle when the person you're closest to seems to slip further away? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. The house felt emptier than it ever had before. Evan stood in the living room, staring out the window, watching the lights of the city flicker in the distance. The soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound, a reminder of how quiet everything had become. It had been 2 days since Maria left. 2 days of nothing. No calls, no texts, just silence. He had replayed their last conversation over and over in his head, trying to make sense of it all, trying to understand where they went wrong. He had tried to reach her, several times. But each call went straight to voicemail. Her words, the words she had said before leaving, kept ringing in his mind. She needed space. She needed to find herself again. The thing was, Evan didn't know how to do that, how to give her space when everything he wanted was her. The thought of losing her felt like a weight on his chest, heavy and suffocating. He had to do something. He couldn't just stand by and let her walk away without a fight. His fingers gripped the edge of the counter as he closed his eyes. He knew he couldn't change the past, but he could still fight for the future. He didn't want to let this go. He didn't want to give up on them. Not now, not after everything they had been through. At the same time, Maria was sitting in her car, parked by the side of the road. It was a quiet neighborhood, just outside the edge of town. The place where she had left, where she had been alone with her thoughts for the past 2 days. She hadn't been able to bring herself to call Evan back. Not yet. She didn't know if she was ready for what he might say, or what she might say to him. Her heart was torn, caught between the life she had built with him and the desire to find something for herself. The truth was, she didn't feel like she knew who she was anymore. Evan had always been there, but somewhere along the way, she had lost herself in the process. She had given so much of herself to him and Lily that she didn't know what was left. She didn't know if she could give any more. But at the same time, there was a part of her that couldn't forget the way Evan had looked at her when she told him she was thinking of leaving. The pain in his eyes had cut through her, deeper than she expected. She had always known that Evan loved her, but in that moment, she realized how much he needed her too. Her hand hovered over her phone. The screen lit up with Evan's number. She had seen it several times over the last few days, but had never pressed call. She didn't know what to say, or if it was even worth trying anymore. But the thought of him being alone, of them being apart, weighed heavily on her heart. Finally, she hit the call button. Her heart was pounding as the phone rang. When Evan's voice came through, it felt like a rush of relief and fear all at once. "Hello?" he answered, his voice hoarse, like he had been waiting for this moment too. "Evan," she said softly. The words felt unfamiliar, like a bridge she wasn't sure how to cross. "Maria," he replied, his voice shaking slightly. I've been waiting for you to call. I've been thinking a lot about everything, about what you said. And I need you to know, I'm not giving up. Not on you. Not on us. Please, tell me you're not giving up too." Maria closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Her heart was torn in 2 directions. She had always felt so lost in the shuffle of their lives, trying to hold everything together. But there was something in Evan's voice now, something raw and honest, that made her feel seen again. "I don't know if I can keep doing this, Evan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can give everything I have and still feel like I'm losing myself. But I can't just walk away either. I don't know what the right thing is anymore." The silence stretched between them, thick and painful. Evan let out a long breath, then spoke again. His voice was steady now, like he had made a decision. "We don't have to have all the answers right now. We can take this one step at a time. We can figure it out together. But I'm not giving up on you, Maria. I'm not letting you go." Maria felt tears well up in her eyes. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that they could make it work, that they could start fresh. But the doubts were still there. The fear that it wouldn't be enough, that the past would always haunt them. "I don't know if I can do it," she whispered. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to keep fighting." "You don't have to do it alone," he said softly. "I'm here, Maria. We don't have to have it all figured out, but we do need to keep trying. Together." There was a long pause as she took in his words, feeling the weight of them. Something shifted in her chest. She wasn't sure if it was enough to erase the past, but it was a start, a chance. "I want to try too," she said finally, her voice more sure now. "I'm willing to try, but we have to be honest. With each other, with ourselves." "I'm all in," he replied, his voice filled with resolve. "I won't stop fighting for us." And for the first time in what felt like forever, Maria felt like she could breathe again. It wasn't a guarantee. It wasn't an easy fix. But it was a choice. The choice to move forward. Together. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between holding on and letting go? What helped you make that decision? Share your story with us in the comments below. The sun was beginning to set when Maria drove back to the house. It had been a long day, full of reflection, painful realizations, and finally, understanding. It felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off her shoulders, but there was still a nervous flutter in her chest. She hadn't expected it to be easy. She knew their problems weren't going to disappear overnight, but there was a sense of peace in her heart now, a quiet assurance that she wasn't walking into the unknown alone. She was choosing this for herself, for Evan, and for Lily. When she walked through the front door, she found Evan sitting at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. He looked up as she entered, his eyes red, like he had been waiting for her for hours. But there was something in his gaze now, a calmness that hadn't been there before. "You came back," Evan said softly, standing up as she approached. His voice was filled with relief, but also a vulnerability that Maria hadn't seen before. "I came back," she replied, her voice steady, but the words felt heavy with meaning. She hadn't just come back physically. She had come back to their life, to their future, to the possibility of healing. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The silence between them felt different now. It wasn't uncomfortable, but more like a shared understanding that they didn't need to rush through their feelings. There was no need to fill the air with words when everything that needed to be said had already been said. Evan reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. "I'm sorry for everything, Maria," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry for all the times I let you down, for all the times I didn't see how hard it was for you. I want to do better for you, for Lily, for us." Maria squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with the love she thought she had lost. "I know, Evan," she said, her voice soft. "And I'm sorry too. I'm sorry for shutting you out. I'm sorry for not giving you the chance to prove that we could fight through this together." He nodded, his eyes searching hers. "Do you think we can still make it work, even with everything that's happened?" Maria took a deep breath, looking around the room, at the life they had built here, the one she had almost walked away from. I think we can," she said finally, her voice steady, her heart full. "But it's going to take time. It's going to take trust. We can't rush it. But if we're both willing to put in the work, I believe we can rebuild." There was a long pause as Evan let her words settle. The idea of rebuilding wasn't easy. It meant facing the past, acknowledging the pain they had both caused, and being vulnerable with each other in ways they hadn't been before. But Evan wasn't afraid of that anymore. He was ready. "Then let's do it," he said, his voice firm with determination. "We'll take it one step at a time. Together." Maria smiled softly, her heart swelling with a mix of hope and relief. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. They were real, and that was all that mattered. Later that night, they sat together on the couch, Lily asleep in her room. The house was quiet, filled only with the soft sounds of their breathing, of the life they had once shared and were now beginning to rebuild. Maria leaned her head on Evan's shoulder, feeling the weight of the past few days fall away. "Do you ever think about how much we've changed?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Evan smiled gently, his hand resting on her own. "Every day. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe we needed to change." Maria nodded, her eyes closing as she let herself relax into the moment. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like they could face it together. The scars of the past were still there, but they weren't as deep as they once seemed. With every conversation, every quiet moment, they were healing, slowly but surely. "I think we'll be okay," she said softly, the words feeling more real than they ever had before. Evan squeezed her hand. "I know we will." And for the first time in a long time, Maria believed it. They sat there for a while, just holding each other, the quiet comfort of their presence speaking louder than anything else. There were no grand promises, no perfect solutions, just the quiet certainty that they were willing to try. Together. Have you ever had to rebuild something that felt broken? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.